Welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the next 60 minutes, we'll run through all the key business news stories you need to know about from right across the African continent. Let's start the program as we always do, the round through the numbers in the markets today. So Nigeria's market, the main index that we do track, that did close lower today for about 0.7%. One PL's shares were down by nearly 10%, but even at today's share price, at the closing, is still over 30% up so far this year. Now, we'll be taking a much deeper look at what Muhammadu Buhari's re-election means for economic policy over the next 4 years in another 15 minutes or so. In a nutshell, investors are expecting more political interference in economic policy making and slower growth as well. Here's what's coming up tonight. Multi-choice shares soar on the debut at the JSE. Zimbabwe's Reserve Bank has limited US dollar sales to cover only foreign payments. And the leaders of the United States and the DPRK meet in Vietnam for their second round of talks. I think quite a bit to get through in Bulletin tonight. But let's start in the markets, where Africa's biggest pay TV group, MultiChoice, has finally debuted on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. The shares opened at about $6.89. That essentially gives the company a market cap of about $3 billion. The African e-commerce giant Naspers has basically decided to spin off MultiChoice after facing quite a bit of pressure to narrow a valuation discount. Naspers, remember, owns a significant chunk of Tencent, the Chinese internet giant. Naspers didn't raise any money from this listing, with the 439 or so million shares instead being distributed to current shareholders. MultiChoice reaches about 14 Naspers to evolve into one of the world's rather biggest players in e-commerce, as MultiChoice registers relatively strong cash flows. So let's dig into the numbers. Angela Coppola joins us now live from Johannesburg with more data on this. So Angela, let's step back a little bit here. MultiChoice has been a reliable, solid cash cow for years for Naspers. So why spin it off as a separate listing? What's the end game here?
Well, you kind of highlighted it already, Raman. You'll recall that Naspers made that early and inspired investment of around $32 million in 2001 into Tencent, that internet company that you mentioned. It turned out to be an extraordinarily successful listing, and by 2018, it had around 30% of that in the Chinese internet company. So they don't expect any discernible offering a service of their own. So their video on demand service is called Showmax. It's making some inroads against the big gorilla in the room, Netflix. It's also got a mobile app that takes care of the television footage side of the offering, which is being taken up by a lot of other players. I'm told, though, that data costs remain a constraint locally and continentally. In South Africa, for example, the regulator has started tackling some of these issues. Data costs are coming down marginally, open-ended data packages. Continentally, the company hasn't indicated what its strategy is going to be and if it's going to be different to what's happening in South Africa, because it's not their core market, they're telling me. They have seen some inroads, and this has led to customers moving off their television sets onto their devices via broadband and data bundles. So it's a threat, but it's not a major one just yet, Raman.
Right, one last question for you. So South Africa does account for about 80% or so of MultiChoice's revenues, at least at this point in time. What is the long-term plan to reduce that concentration risk in that market and grow revenues in other parts of the continent, Nigeria?
Choice still sees a substantial opportunity in South Africa, and they're saying it's in the middle and mass markets. I'm told that according to their research, there are some 13 million addressable houses or homes in South Africa that could and should be using one or all of their services, and that's according to their research. That number is significantly higher for the rest of Africa, where they estimate there are some 27 million addressable homes that they could be targeting. Interestingly, though, the company says it sees itself as a content business, and perhaps more importantly, they're also saying that there aren't any plans for them to move away from satellite as their primary delivery mechanism. Their research indicates that fiber and broadband growth will increase by 12% locally and 5% continentally, but the cost of data and broadband is still going to remain a long-term barrier to entry into the majority of the markets that they're planning on targeting. So it appears that they're setting their sails for that particular wind direction. Satellite for the future. Raman?
Indeed, a fascinating discussion. Certainly worth a longer chat on the program, but we'll leave it there for the time being. That's Angela Coppola there live in Johannesburg. Now, we're still in South Africa, though. Africa's largest supermarket chain, Shoprite, says it's still committed to its fourth largest market, Angola, despite some pretty challenging trading conditions over there. You see, Angola is suffering from severe recession, hyperinflation, and a huge devaluation of its currency. It actually devalued it by over 80%. That in turn led to the first half earnings for Shoprite to fall by a margin not seen in a decade. Yes, CGTN's Sumitra Naidu with this report.
Shoprite did warn in January that its results wouldn't be as stellar as usual. Investors were expecting declines of up to 36%. Instead, Shoprite posted a 24% decline and a trading profit of $250 million. The decline, though, was the first in 10 years. A weak economy, food price deflation, and hiccups with the new IT platform weighed on local operations.
We've never had 18 consecutive months of deflation, and particularly the Shoprite brand was hit quite hard by that because it over-indexed in commodities. So we had now the negative effect of a disrupted operation, then a new platform, and we immediately went into Black Friday, of which demand is enormous. It is our single biggest trading day of our entire history and calendar. So all of that together had or caused some stock availability issues, and that resulted in that over 1 billion in lost sales.
Angola entered a third consecutive quarter of recession late last year. Hyperinflation is making basic food items unaffordable. Shoprite says it's confident that Angola, which makes up 50% of the group's non-South African operations, will return to profitability.
Shoprite is definitely feeling the pain of a constrained consumer market. The South African operations are still faring pretty well, but Angola remains a challenge for the group.
Angola's participation in our non-RSA operations have become huge, and we also have quite a lot of capital tied in. So this year, what could we do when we had an 85% devaluation in the currency? It meant for consumers that product prices actually doubled. And we couldn't do that. So we had to absorb some of the price changes, and that meant that our gross margin have reduced by like 7 to 8%.
Shoprite closed several non-performing stores in Tanzania, Mauritius, Egypt and India, but it opened 86 new stores in 2018, creating over 1,700 jobs. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
On to Libya now. The old centre of Benghazi lies in ruins, but one shopping street has sprung up in the war-ravaged Libyan city, and it's covered with sportswear and fashion stores that frankly wouldn't be out of place in Dubai or Istanbul. Yes, Penina Karibe with more.
The city of Benghazi has been flogged by war in the past years. This has caused restrictions on operations of various businesses. But as peace dominates, foreign brands are tapping into residents' desire to enjoy shopping again.
We opened before the last war, and after the damage that followed, we closed for a while. After the war ended, we reopened, and thank God, even other stores opened. The economy has moved a bit, and there are customers. Thank God, even sales are improving. There was none of this during the war.
The war limited imports as it forced the closure of Benghazi's port. The extent of damages on properties is valued in millions of dollars. It has been a costly affair to reopen the stores.
We spent nearly $324,000 in investments to cover the damages after the war.
Many of the city's buildings are still riddled with bullet holes, but with the end of conflict in 2017, shops have returned and Venice Street has brought back a level of wealthy consumerism.
Most stores are very helpful. You can buy all that you want. You can pay via PayMe, MobiCash, or pay in cash. Most stores help as much as they can.
Irrespective of the effects of war on the economy, most residents can still afford to pay for their lifestyle, but not in cash as there is a shortage of banknotes. Checks are accepted in some shops at a premium as they can usually only be cashed on the black market at a fee.
4 years ago, people were suddenly thinking about other things. We were, of course, in a state of war, and during war, people cannot buy anything. You might think about finding another place to rent and things like that. But now, people have a wider perspective of things. They want to buy things and go shopping. They want to see brands. Hopefully, we will one day be like Paris.
Venice Street was mostly wasteland until 2011, when former leader Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown. With its trendy new stores and elegant cafes, it now holds a different outlook that promotes fashion and trade. Penina Karibe, CGTN.
All right, and a quick run through some company news now. Let's start in East Africa. The US farm machinery manufacturer, John Deere, is targeting Kenyan farmers to sell its contractor business model. Now, that essentially will see the company sell tractors to specific farmers who will then lease tilling services to others at a fee. As most smallholder farmers in this country can't afford to buy the tractors outright, they tend to rely on certain hired machinery that can be hard to access in the peak planting season and often at fairly unpredictable prices. Still in Kenya, the mid-tier lender Family Bank has appointed a female CEO in a largely male-dominated industry. This appointment, of course, is still subject to approval by the Central Bank of Kenya. The new CEO is Ms. Rebecca Mbithi. Her appointment, of course, as I mentioned, still subject to approval by regulators. She's currently the company secretary and director of legal services at the bank. She takes over from David Thuku, who resigned in September last year. Over in West Africa, Royal Dutch Shell has disclosed that Nigeria's claims of billions in back taxes could essentially delay the development of a major oil field in the country. Nigeria recently ordered several major foreign oil and gas firms to pay nearly $20 billion it says it's due in back taxes. Shell has made progress with the government on terms for operation, but a decision on its development in the Bonga Northwest field is essentially unlikely to be made in 2019. And South Korean tech giant Samsung says it aims to expand production lines in Egypt for home appliances and mobile phones. According to company officials, the company has invested $265 million in Egypt in the last couple of years. The volume of exports have gone up to $780 million in Egypt, as South Korean investments stand at about $560 million through tech giants, particularly Samsung and LG. That's a run through your company headlines. It's time for a short break. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. Zimbabwe's Reserve Bank opts to limit US dollar sales to only cover foreign payments. And we'll explore why Tanzania is reconsidering its previous rejection of a trade deal from the EU.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sumitra. Hello.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to the program. Zimbabwe's commercial banks are under orders to restrict US dollar transactions to only companies and individuals who have legitimate foreign payments to make. That's according to a directive from the central bank. The document basically states that those kinds of transactions should be aimed at stimulating economic growth. The Southern African country abandoned a much discredited $1-to-1 peg for its dollar surrogate bond notes and electronic dollars last week, effectively merging them into a much lower value transitional currency that they're calling the RTGS dollar. Now, economists are saying that this reform shows promise if the government does make good on a plan to let the new currency fluctuate accordingly. But the current official rate does value the new currency at much higher rates than what's on the black market, which many ordinary Zimbabweans use to buy and sell their dollars. We're still in Zimbabwe. Tanzania's national carrier, Air Tanzania, has reintroduced flights into Harare from Dar es Salaam, its commercial capital. Now, the airline will service the route 3 times a week. The flights are aimed at easing transportation constraints between the two countries. Here's Beryl Oro with more.
When President Emerson Mnangagwa came into power, a lot was expected, including the instant turnaround of Zimbabwe's struggling economy. Mnangagwa has since been making efforts to reassure the world of Zimbabwe's readiness to work. The Southern African state's attractiveness to regional airlines has once again been confirmed by the maiden flight of Air Tanzania's all-new Airbus aircrafts at the Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport. It's a move that many say is certainly going to unlock the economic linkages between the two nations.
This historic relaunch is expected to open a whole chapter from an economic point of view, as it enables our citizens to enjoy communication, diverse tourist attractions, and trading. This improvement and increase in connectivity will make it easier for tourists around the world to visit these attractions for the benefit of our states.
The coming in of Air Tanzania is set to provide a reprieve for Zimbabwe's aviation industry following the suspension of some of the regional airlines in the country due to the current foreign currency crisis. Air Tanzania, which last flew into Harare about 2 decades ago, will now fly into Harare 3 times a week.
The resumptions of these flights will promote activities of business, tourism, agriculture, culture, etc. to both countries. It is our hope that this scheduled flight will support the strategies of the income increase and contribute to the economic growth of our two countries through a fair service delivery.
Meanwhile, the Zimbabwean government is at the moment working on liberalizing its air transport markets. It plans to enhance its destination connectivity. The country's Civil Aviation Authority has finished the modernization of airspace management systems in line with the international trends within the aviation industry. Global reports have estimated that over half of all tourists travel by air, with aviation-related tourism supporting around 35 million jobs worldwide. therefore in total contributing more than $800 billion of the global GDP. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Bit of interesting trade news in East Africa. The government of Tanzania is reviewing its position on the East African Community's Economic Partnership Agreement. That's basically a trade deal that was signed by the bloc with the EU. And Tanzania has changed its mind with a view to endorsing the deal, apparently. The East African country had rejected the deal overwhelmingly in November 2016, arguing at the time that the agreement will have serious consequences on both tax revenues and the growth of its domestic industrial sector. Officials in the country are currently said to be in talks with the EU counterparts on the agreement before a final decision is made. The states of the East African Community have about 3 months left to make their respective final decisions on whether or not to sign the EPA, and it's left the bloc divided. Let's head over to Nigeria now. The Electoral Commission has confirmed that the incumbent, Muhammadu Buhari, won the election held last week, Saturday. Now, this is the second win for him at the ballot for the 76-year-old individual. Our correspondent, Phil Ihaza, takes a closer look at his career and his life.
President Muhammadu Buhari has taken over the reins of power twice since Nigeria gained independence in 1960. He became the 7th head of state after a successful coup in 1983, ruling for barely 2 years before being ousted. After 3 failed attempts since 2003, Buhari eventually won the 2015 elections, defeating an incumbent for the first time in Nigeria's history.
What stood Buhari apart is his unquenchable thirst for justice, for accountability, and incorruptibility. The amalgam of all these qualities translated into the love and support for him by the common man on the street.
His efforts in recovering Nigeria's stolen assets in excesses of billions of dollars have been widely celebrated by his supporters. However, critics say his anti-corruption campaign is lopsided. Nigeria fell 12 places in the Transparency International Corruption Ranking for 2017. Buhari, who turned 76 years last December, spent over 3 months of his tenure abroad on health grounds. As a former military leader, many Nigerians had hoped for a quick fix in dealing with insecurity problems, including a prolonged war on insurgency. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
So then the Electoral Commission in Nigeria has declared a winner, but this story in many ways is far from over. Let's get the latest from Lagos, where CGTN's Deji Banos is live for us tonight. So Deji, given how rough the economy has been in the last 4 years, many an analyst had forecast that this was going to be a very, very tight race, but the results show that it was anything but that. Where did the forecasts go wrong?
Well, because those who made those forecasts actually don't understand Nigeria, and they really do not understand the way politics is played in this country. I mean, they fail, for instance, to take into account the political enigma called Muhammadu Buhari. They fail to take into account the behavior, as in the voter behavior in this country. And they also fail to take into account that, politics, when you look at the structure of both political parties, before that election, before the presidential election last Saturday, the APC controls 22 states in this country. 20, so the APC has 22 governors. Now, if you have that kind of structure, where you have 22 governors, all these governors working for you, there's just no way these governors would want to, wouldn't deliver their state, so to speak. And these governors would have local government chairmen. So these governors have the political structure to actually look at his political history, right from when he started running for office in 2003. I mean, he's always got millions of votes, at least 12 million from that part of the country, and nothing has changed. He's very much liked in the north of the country. So, and to be candid, Ramah, as you have it across Africa, voters usually basically vote on sentiments, not on issues, if you like. So these were the things those who made those forecasts failed to take into account in making that forecast. It's no surprise at all that they missed it. It's no surprise at all that the result has come out this way. It's what some of us actually expected was going to happen.
Right, so the turnout, though, in this particular poll was especially low, 35.6% according to INEC data. The 2015 polls had a turnout of about 44%. Other than the fact that the polls were moved forward by a week at the very last minute, what else accounted for these especially low turnout numbers? I mean, places like Lagos, for instance, had some really interesting data.
Well, Ramah, the fact is that Nigeria has a history of low turnout in general elections. I mean, you just have to look at, look at it from 1999 when democracy returned to Nigeria up to this moment. The highest turnout we've ever had was in 2003 when we had 69.1%. But from 2003 downwards, it's just been going down, and this is actually the lowest. No doubt that the postponement actually didn't help matters. But, voter apathy is a big problem. Is a big problem in Nigeria. Most people would collect, they would go to register, they will collect the voter cards, but they never go out to vote. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't believe it, Ramah, most people basically use the voter card for identification purposes. They use it for identity, in banks and what have you. But when it comes to actual voting, you never see them. So, this is a new low. It is the lowest we've had since since 1999. For some of us, it's no surprise because, it's been part of our history. And, we just have to wait and hope that things would change in the future. Maybe when younger people begin to push harder, then maybe things will change. But for now, it's just the way it is. It's always been like that.
Right. Let's loop back to INEC for a moment there, because for years, months really, in the run-up to the election, they kept saying, we're ready. We're going to hold this election on the 16th of February. Nothing's going to change. And then at the very last minute, that story changed. Can they be held legally liable in any way for that decision?
Now, just take out the word legal. Legally, sorry. I don't think, of course, they can be held liable, but when you say legally liable now, that's actually what I don't know, because I don't think anybody will want to go to court to challenge INEC, for shifting. The fact is that the law allows INEC to fix the date of elections. It also allows INEC to actually shift the date of the election, provided it's not in breach of the Constitution. So it was well within the powers of INEC to have shifted that election last week. So I don't think we're going to see any legal challenge to that. Legally speaking, INEC has that right and the powers to shift the election. But no doubt, I mean, we would blame INEC for this because it kept giving everybody the assurance that everything was ready and that the election was going to go ahead as scheduled. And, unfortunately, it's actually not the first time we've had this election postponement. We had it in 2015 when it was postponed by 6 weeks. We also had it in 2011. As a matter of fact, that of 2011 was so bad that people had actually gone out to vote. People were voting when INEC suddenly announced it was shifting the election. That's just it, Ramah. INEC has the power to shift, but of course, what it didn't help matters at all. I just think INEC should have, told people before that day that it was not ready, and then shifting the election on the morning of the election, it just didn't make sense at all. But now we understand. Well, it had some logistics challenges. That's the reason why it had to shift the election. The most important thing now is that the election has come and gone. The next election will be coming up March the 9th. Let's hope there's no shift in that election.
Indeed. We'll have to see how PDP plays this out when they actually do challenges in court. We'll be there for the time being, though. Thank you for that. That's Deji Badmus there live in Lagos. Now then, let's move over to Syria, where the government is opening the door to foreign companies to invest in rebuilding the war-torn state. According to the United Nations, the remodeling is expected to cost anywhere between $300 to $400 billion. Egyptian entrepreneurs have traveled to the capital, Damascus, in order to study the possibility of being involved in the reconstruction effort. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with all the details.
Egyptian companies already have experience in reconstruction in Libya, Lebanon and Iraq. Now they're seeking similar deals in Syria.
Syria needs infrastructure projects such as roads, water stations, and real estate. This will encourage people who have immigrated to other nations to return. It will also help to transfer Egyptian expertise and know-how of various sectors to Syria.
Taking a portion of these lucrative contracts would create huge revenues and employment opportunities for Egypt. But the lack of funding could be a challenge. Ironically, Saudi Arabia, which has been fighting Syria's Bashar al-Assad, could actually finance his reconstruction efforts.
There are serious steps in coordination with the Saudi government to pump more money in our reconstruction projects to provide the proper equipment and all logistical support so that these projects would continue smoothly in Syria. We are expecting $100 billion from Saudi Arabia in the first phase for the next 5 years.
Experts say Saudi Arabia's economic involvement through Egypt is aimed at countering the growing influence of arch-foe Iran in Syria. Meantime, Egyptian businessmen have submitted a plan to the Syrian government of the cities they will invest in Syria. The Egyptian companies are waiting for assurances from the Syrian government concerning two issues before they begin construction. First,
with a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
In the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to the program. These are the stories we're following and making headlines at this hour. The death toll from the train accident in Egypt has gone up to 26. At least 40 other individuals have been injured. Hours after the accident, the Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Mabuli accepted the resignation of the country's transport minister. This latest accident has brought to the fore the safety of Egypt's railway system, especially because this is not the first incident of this kind. Over in West African Mali, to be specific, 17 people were killed after a corpse rigged with an IED exploded. An explosive device is said to have been planted on the body of a man who had been shot dead. The incident occurred in Diankabu. It's a small town in central Mali. It's suspected to have been carried out by jihadists. The country has been struggling to regain control and stability after Al-Qaeda-linked extremists took control of the north in early 2012. Large stretches of the African state do remain out of central government control. Nigeria's Electoral Commission has confirmed that the incumbent, President Muhammadu Buhari, has actually won the election. This is the second win at the ballot for the 76-year-old. His supporters are celebrating, but his main opponent from the PDP party and a former Vice President, Atiku Abubakar, has disputed the results. And the African Union has concluded a year-long assessment of armed personnel in the Horn of African nations. The data was collected in order to boost the Somali government's efforts at vetting and preparing a capable domestic army ahead of AMISOM's exit in the country. That's the run through the stories making your headlines. All right, then let's jump into one of the big stories around the world today. The US President Donald Trump's former personal attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen, has testified against him over allegations of engaging in criminal conduct while in office. Mr. Cohen confirmed that Trump was aware of his longtime confidant Roger Stone's efforts to reach out to WikiLeaks ahead of the release of hacked Democratic emails during the 2016 campaign. In a rather dramatic opening statement, Cohen displayed to the House Oversight Committee a copy of a repayment check that he says was effectively reimbursement for hush money payments to women made during the campaign. Cohen has also been sentenced to 3 years after pleading guilty to a campaign finance-related charge, and now he's scheduled to serve the sentence starting from May this year. Jim Spellman joins us from Washington with the latest on this particular story. So, Jim, we know about the payoffs to individuals, to businesses in exchange for the silence. But realistically, from what we've heard in the last couple of hours about the release of the Clinton emails before WikiLeaks released them.
Well, a lot of this does pertain to things we've already been aware of, but there are several new revelations here from Cohen. The WikiLeaks information, some of the most damaging to Trump. Cohen now says that Trump, quote, knew that Roger Stone was talking with Julian Assange about a WikiLeaks drop of Democratic National Committee emails. Now, Roger Stone is a one-time Trump campaign advisor. Cohen describes a speakerphone conversation between Trump and Stone. Stone informs Trump that he was in touch with WikiLeaks and that hacked emails from the Clinton campaign would soon be leaked to the media. According to Cohen, Trump responds, quote, wouldn't that be great? Now, Trump has denied knowing about the email leaks. This is at the heart of the special counsel investigation. Critics of the president will say that this phone call, this speakerphone call, constitutes collusion. Cohen also testified about allegations that Trump had an affair with a porn star and then paid her $130,000 to keep silent about the relationship. Cohen says he arranged the payments and lied to the First Lady Melania Trump about it. To back up his word, Cohen brought evidence to Congress, copies of wire transfers of the $130,000 to the porn star and a copy of a personal $35,000 check for partial payment to the porn star. Cohen says that Trump wrote that check while he was still president. That's a $35,000 check from Trump to Cohen written while Trump was president. Cohen also testifying about other aspects of Trump's financial dealings, including the Trump Tower Moscow deal and his taxes. He sums up his take on Trump by saying this, quote, he's a racist, he's a con man, and he's a cheat. Rama?
Indeed. So the White House has spent quite a bit of time ahead of this attacking Michael Cohen. We've seen pretty much the same thing from the president's Republican allies as well. But realistically, how damaging could this testimony be to the president, both in a personal capacity, but also as far as the 2020 campaign is concerned?
Well, first off, there's no doubt that Cohen's credibility is an issue here. He will soon begin serving, as you mentioned, a 3-year prison sentence for tax fraud and lying under oath. He has admitted to lying to Congress in the past. As President Trump prepared to meet with Kim Jong-un in Vietnam, he tweeted this, quote, Michael Cohen was one of many lawyers who represented me, unfortunately. He had other clients also. He was just disbarred by the state Supreme Court for lying and fraud. He did bad things unrelated to Trump. He is lying in order to reduce his prison sentence. Now, Cohen knows that he will face this criticism, and he said this earlier, quote, I have lied, but I am not a liar. I've done bad things, but I'm not a bad man. I have fixed things, but I am no longer your fixer, Mr. Trump. People will have to decide, of course, whether they believe Cohen or not. So how will this impact the 2020 election? Well, first we'll have to see what the special counsel report says. But this testimony from someone so close to the president, clearly a major blow to Donald Trump. And we can expect more damaging hearings like this because Democrats now control the U.S. House of Representatives, and they're the ones who decide who to call in front of their panels.
Indeed, and of course the evidence is going to be very, very interesting to read as well. Jim Spellman in Washington, thank you. Now, speaking of Donald Trump, he has met the leader of the DPRK, Kim Jong-un, the Vietnamese capital of Hanoi for their second summit. Kim and Trump exchanged handshakes before sitting down for what the White House described as a social dinner. Of course, this comes 8 months after their first meeting in Singapore, which had relatively high hopes of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. But progress has not been as smooth or as rapid as many had hoped. The two leaders are expected to meet again on the second summit to hammer out a much more tangible and detailed agreement.
I am certain that a great outcome will be achieved this time that will be welcomed by all people. I will do my best to make that happen.
And we made a lot of progress, and I think the biggest progress was our relationship is really a good one. And as I've said many times, and I say it to the press, I say to anybody that wants to listen, I think that your country has tremendous economic potential, unbelievable, unlimited.
One of the world's biggest toy makers, the Lego Group, has assembled its growing sales and profits in 2018 thanks in part to diversifying away from its most iconic product, the coloured plastic bricks we know it for. The renowned Danish brand's net profits are up 3.5% to roughly $1.3 billion last year. Revenues are up 4%. They hit over $5.5 billion. Now, Lego posted low single-digit growth in established markets like the US and Western Europe. But in China, the firm's revenues grew strongly in the double digits as the brand expanded into entirely new cities. Still in the world of Legos, the toy giant is expected to more than double its current number of stores in China as it continues to grow in the country, despite an economic downturn over there. The details, here's CGTN's Bulletin.
For most Lego fans, these colorful bricks mean hours and hours of fun. A dragon, a crane, a helicopter. The sky is the limit. 6-year-old Lu Hanchen is crazy about Legos. In just a few minutes, she made these little three guys out of hundreds of them.
I like playing with Legos very much. Sometimes when my mom asks me to sleep or eat, I still want to play with them.
Many say playing with toys like Legos can boost their children's creativity and patience. Lu's mother, Zhuwen, has also bought her traditional toys like flying chess, but Lu seems less interested in those.
I prefer kids to play with smarter toys that can train their coordination and intelligence. Toy safety is also very important.
Lego first entered China in the 1980s. Now the company has over 60 branded retail stores nationwide, and they plan to double that to 140 by the end of this year. This ambitious expansion plan shows Lego is optimistic about Chinese families' growing need for toys and the fun and creative spirits they bring about. To meet the growing demand, Lego built a factory in Jiaxing City of eastern China's Zhejiang province, expanding production. And a new flagship store has opened in Beijing this February.
We are doing a right thing at the right market at the right time. More and more affluent middle-class populations, and also the second child policy implementation, and also the upgrade of people's consumptions. That we feel there's a great opportunity for us in China.
Many believe China is a shining beacon in a dim global toy market. Huang says, although challenges like copycats remain, they will continue to take the right strategies to explore the market. Wu Lei, CGTN, Shanghai.
Malaysia's economic growth in the fourth quarter of 2018 has surpassed expectations. The country's GDP growth was 4.7% year-on-year.
Growth of 4.7%, low unemployment, rising wages, stabilizing prices. It all sounds like good news. But expectations on Malaysia's Pakatan Harapan government are high, especially among those who voted for change.
A lot of the basic grocery items are still increasing in price. We don't really see any difference than before. Right now, the ordinary people are suffering and really feel the distress and difficulties in their daily lives.
Since its shock election victory last May, the new government has trimmed spending, reducing some subsidies and handouts, while undertaking a raft of reforms to improve governance, transparency and accountability.
We think that it will likely bear fruits in 2 to 3 years down the road, especially if there is a greater traction among investors that the government is serious, and importantly ensure that the positive spillovers actually reaches the masses.
The government is looking outside its ranks for help.
As he did when tackling the Asian financial crisis, Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has again appointed a council of economic experts to advise the government.
This time around, it's more a crisis of confidence in the new government, especially on its economic agenda. By co-opting all these experts, it will actually lend greater confidence in the ability of the government to manage the economy.
We hope in the coming years the government will be able to improve our lives a lot. If we don't see improvement, then there will be another political tsunami and we will change the government.